special guest. Some of you may know her, right, Aura? Our friend is Catarina Rivera. She's a public speaker and DEI consultant with over 14 years of experience in the public sector. Catarina works with companies to improve accessibility and inclusion, retain employees, and design better products. She is the founder of Blindish Latina, a platform smashing disability stigmas through storytelling, advocacy, and training. Catarina has worn hearing aids from a young age and was diagnosed with progressive vision loss at 17 years old. Thank you, Catarina, for your time. We really appreciate you accepting the invitation.
Thank you, Rodrigo. I'm really excited to be here and share with you all.
Excellent. Some questions. Catarina, you have Puerto Rican and Cuban ascendancy. We also have some people with Puerto Rican ascendancy on the team. How has your heritage shaped your experience?
I love this question, and I feel like it's such a big question because culture and heritage is just a part of who you are, how you see the world. One of the things that I appreciate about being Cuban and Puerto Rican is that I was able to travel to Puerto Rico, travel to Cuba, and to see that the world is bigger than the United States. That just the history of my family, there's a lot of immigration, and it goes all the way back to El País Vasco, the Basque country in Spain. I've been able to meet family there. So I just appreciate the richness of the culture. Yes, it's the small things like dancing and food, but language is also a huge thing. My parents taught me Spanish as my first language. So I've been lucky that I've been able to have a strong connection to Latinidad, even having been born in the United States, because there are a lot of people, generations down the line, that lose their connection to their culture and their family's background. So one of the things that it did do for me is that I really recognized my privilege. Both of my parents have graduate degrees, and they were able to navigate systems and fight for me, especially with my disability, in ways that other Latino families who maybe don't have strong English skills, or the children are forced to navigate systems, they would have the same level of access or outcomes that I had in my life. So at the beginning of my career, I was focused on how can I use my privilege to give back to the Latino community and have a sense of purpose in that way. So I started my career as a bilingual educator in the Bronx, and I taught for 4 years. And I also worked with the Latino community in Uptown Manhattan on food justice and food sovereignty initiatives. So I feel like it helped me to develop a sense of purpose and values as far as how I wanted to live.
Well, thank you. You have Usher syndrome. Could you please explain what that is to our audience?
Yes. So Usher syndrome is the most common genetic cause of deafness and blindness that is combined. So there are 3 different types of Usher syndrome, and the differences really relate to when the hearing loss appears in your life, when the blindness appears, and how progressive it is. The type that I have is called Usher syndrome type 2. I was born with moderate to severe hearing loss. So I wore hearing aids from the time that I was 3 or 4 years old. And we didn't know that I had Usher syndrome until I started to notice problems with my vision as a teenager. And it was night blindness that I noticed first of all, where I was at a camp with a bunch of my friends. It was a karate camp, and we were going to play a prank on the instructor. And everybody ran outside, and this was somewhere where there wasn't a street light, there wasn't natural light. It was completely dark. And I saw that everybody ran so easily. And the minute I got outside, I couldn't see anything. I couldn't run down those steps and join them. So it was a big kind of warning sign. So I was 17 when I was diagnosed with Usher syndrome, and the progressive vision loss is something that I found out about at that time. My hearing loss is not supposed to decline. It's just my vision. But people can have the type of vision loss that I have separately. It's a totally separate condition called retinitis pigmentosa that you can have just by itself. But Usher syndrome is a syndrome, which means it combines more than one thing. So that's the background. But basically, how does it affect my life? How do I see? So basically, what it is that my visual field, instead of being 180 degrees, has narrowed considerably. I don't see below. I don't see to the side. What I do see in the center is strong. I have strong central vision. And so I just want to speak a little bit about blindness. People
Sure.
think that blindness means you see black, that there's a totality to the word. And actually, a lot of people see something, whether that's shape or color, or like me, have some vision in a specific, very defined area. And it doesn't make our blindness any less valid. Like I'm using a white cane and I can see. So I have to use all the tools that I have at my disposal. When I'm using a white cane, it sees below for me so I can keep my head looking up. Otherwise, I'd have to look down the whole time. There's a lot of misunderstanding of blindness and unfortunately bullying and not believing of blind people. So that's something that I always want to speak about and make people aware that blindness is a spectrum.
When did you start your advocacy? And how did you become such an active advocate?
Well, it was a natural part of my journey. And when I was 17 and I found out that I was going to be losing my vision, I was upset. It was really hard. It was a tragedy in my life. It was an obstacle, and I had to deal with it. I kind of dealt with it as little as I could in the beginning, and there was a lot of denial. As I started to move into adulthood, I moved to New York City. I was focused on being independent and continuing my career, like starting my career. And so I had to deal with it a little bit. Um, but I didn't really start until many years after my diagnosis to receive services, to fully address how I could live better as a disabled person. So I call that my journey from denial to acceptance. Like once I accepted, I started to live better and understand that there were so many tools out there, there were so many role models, and connect to the community more. After I was really strong in my acceptance, I started to move to the next stage that I call self advocacy, which is something I had been doing all my life, but I became much stronger on it. So speaking up in a meeting about my needs, or in a fitness class about how I needed the instructor to demonstrate to stand further away from me so that my vision would be wider. And, just little moments over and over and over again, advocating for myself until that became so strong, like a muscle. And that's what I say that self advocacy is. It is a muscle that you can strengthen each time you speak up. And I practice. So once I felt really strong in that, I felt that now I had the capacity to be a public advocate. And not everybody is there. Everyone's disability journey is different, and some people really struggle. I think I encourage everyone who has a disability to try to get to a place of acceptance and seeing your disability as a positive thing. It makes you special, that the world is what we need to change. The world is what's holding us back, and that we can be proud of our disability, and that's a subversive concept, disability pride, but it is out there and I love it. And so I say I am proud of my disability. So I started last year, Blindish Latina, and I got so much positive feedback. And so now I continue to increase my impact with my business, because now I can reach more people, impact workplaces, and create better environments where there is more inclusion and accessibility, and understanding that disabled individuals are all around us in society. We have so much to contribute. So that's kind of like where it started. It's really important to me to represent what I want to see. There's not enough representation of Latinos in disability. And even in society, there are some people who think that for some reason the disabled exists outside of society in another dimension. And so I like to say, like, I'm right here. I'm a disabled professional, 2 graduate degrees. I'm Latina, and I'm right here in society.
Could you elaborate more on that intersectionality in your experience as a disabled Latina woman in the US?
Yes, and I'm really glad that you brought up the term intersectionality. It's really powerful, and I know that some people have heard it, but maybe they don't know where it came from. It came from a um, Black scholar named Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989. And it really speaks about the interconnected nature of social categorizations like race, class, gender, and how they apply to an individual because they create overlaps and systems of discrimination and disadvantage. So for me, I can see, where power comes from, where it intersects for as a disabled Latina woman. One example that I wanted to give to you all today is that as a woman going out alone at night, I'm already concerned for my safety. Now I'm a disabled woman going out at night and I'm using a white cane. So I am always concerned about, does this make me a target? Does this make me look vulnerable? And that is just an example of like how my identities can overlap in that scenario. Another scenario I wanted to give is in the workplace. Many women face a stigma of being called aggressive when you speak up, when you have a strong voice in a meeting. So then, if I'm the only vocal disabled person also speaking up and saying that, hey, we need captions or we need to use Teams instead of Zoom, and this is not just me that could benefit from captions, I can still be seen as aggressive in an even like greater way. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important to look at intersectionality, and also disability is super interesting because every identity group actually connects with disability. And we don't pay attention to that enough. For example, a large portion of the, when you look at statistics of interactions with the criminal justice system, we talk a lot about people of color. There's also a high percentage of disabled people that are incarcerated or have had contact with the criminal justice system. So we need to talk about that as well, and how that particular context matters and what we can do to address it, because that's important context.
And it also talks to the complexity, intersectionality in this case, to the complexity of identities that are social constructs and identities that are practical realities. Mm-hmm. In your website, you talk about your disability as an invisible disability. Would you please elaborate on that concept?
Yes, many disabilities are invisible. I'll give you some examples from my perspective, and I'll share a little bit more about others. We can never truly know what is going on with another person. Before I was using a white cane, I bumped into people in New York City. I tried not to, but I'm a blind woman in a very busy city, and it happened. So also, let's think about networking events. When I show up to a networking event and somebody is trying to speak to me and I don't hear them or see them, in the salsa club, a person has definitely stood right in front of me, tried to ask me to dance, and my friends have had to say, there's somebody there, because I haven't seen them, and that's when the lights are dim. So let's consider, what are those people thinking about me in those scenarios? What's their interpretation? It's that I'm rude, that I'm stuck up, I've ignored them, you know, and are not paying attention, but I'm disabled. And I don't have a sign on my body. I don't have a megaphone letting everybody know in my perimeter, disabled person, this is what you need to know. There's no way to know that. So when I have my white cane or when I make my hearing aids visible, although not everybody will notice it, I can make my invisible disability visible. Those are markers. Other people won't ever have a visual marker. There are so many people who have mental health conditions, who have cognitive difficulties. Chronic illness is another big one. And my advice to anybody listening who's non-disabled is don't ask them to prove their disability to you. And please believe them. I hear so much from the chronic illness community, for example, that when they cancel plans with their friends because they are ill, their friends get mad at them. And there's real lack of understanding of the fact that their experiences are valid, that they actually are sick. So I think it's really important to understand that there's so many invisible disabilities out there, and we need to have positive assumptions of others.
Okay. You're also very vocal about overcoming the cliches, such as inspirational and brave. And I love how you call it in your website, inspirational porn. How can we build productive conversations about diversity and disability without falling into the traps of token representation and encapsulated identities?
We're going to tackle this. Inspirational, brave. How many times have you heard these words used to describe a disabled person? I'm sure you've seen it. Storylines in movies. Thank you. I see Paola raising her hand. Yes. It's the common narrative. You see it in the news media, movies, TV films, or I already said film, but books. And let's break that down. Why are you using the word inspirational? A lot of times it's because a non-disabled person cannot believe that a disabled person would get up in the morning and have a happy life. Like that they could have a great life and do the same things as you do. So a lot of times there's also an othering of the disabled person. So when you say, oh, I'm inspired by you, and some people, how can I say this? Inspirational porn is talked a lot about in the disability community, and there are a lot of advocates who laid the groundwork here. There are also some disabled people who have not come to the same conclusions as this community. So let's just use a hypothetical example. Say you have a motivational speaker who's like, I'm disabled and I climbed a mountain. What's your excuse? That's the kind of like framing that is problematic as far as someone looking at a disabled person and saying, oh, their life is worse than mine. So what? I should feel better. I should do more. I should strive harder. And that's othering and objectifying to the disabled person in that scenario. And it's not to say that we can't be inspirational. Like, yes, I can be inspirational, but don't be inspired by me living life. Be inspired by my actual accomplishments, by something concrete that matters. And I also have issue with this construct because when we focus on how the disabled individual has overcome obstacles, has accomplished something amazing, a lot of times what we are doing is a lot of hard work to overcome obstacles from ableism and from a society that's not designed to be inclusive to us. So when we celebrate that, we kind of absolve society of the responsibility to work on those obstacles. You know, it's not enough that one person, and it's not right for one person to have to bear the burden to adapt consistently and put in extra work to try to have the same experience in life. And not every disabled person is going to be able to do that. So there are a lot of people left out. And there's nothing wrong with disability. Just disabled is not a bad word. So we need to check ourselves. And I don't want to hear other euphemisms like handicapable or differently able. Use the word disabled.
Yeah, when we think about urban spaces specifically, right? You visit Puerto Rico and in many Latin American cities, it is impossible to cross the street if you are disabled because there's simply no spaces for that. You have to climb a set of stairs and cross the highway over a bridge. And that's just everyday life.
Yeah, and that's a very concrete example. I appreciate that. So if somebody does cross the street, we shouldn't be clapping. Yeah, they did it. It's like you have to actually fix the structural problem. So just for the non-disabled community, I think it's really important for you to develop a commitment to doing better, to dismantling ableism, dismantling barriers, and focus on your commitment as an ally. Find ways to authentically learn from disabled people or pass the mic to them. How can you give them the platform? How can you hire them? If you can hire writers, hire them for your company, be willing to dive into complexities and nuance rather than a simple narrative when writing a piece, for example, in the media. And if you are disabled and you're not currently claiming your disabled identity, I encourage you to join the club and come over and learn more about disability, disability studies, disability justice. I think it's very empowering to do that.
Thank you, Catarina. One last question, and we're going to open the floor so the audience can answer a couple of questions before time's up. So, visibility in social media. You're very active in social media channels, including the new ones as Clubhouse. What are your digital outreach strategies, and what are the limits of these channels?
Sure. So I'll try to keep this one brief so we can get to questions. I post 5 times a week on Instagram and Facebook. I'm 2 to 3 times a week on LinkedIn. I show up on Clubhouse for conversations that I'm moderating. And I really spend time with people. I'm in the DMs. I'm having conversations. I respond to all of my comments, and I build authentic connections. So if somebody connects with me on LinkedIn, I try to have a meeting with them, learn more about them. I think it's really important to create authentic relationships. And one of the benefits of social media is that we're able to connect across disability in a way that is much easier. I'm learning every day from Instagram, from other disabled creators, and very quickly absorbing new concepts. And we're able to build a strong community. Even on Clubhouse, there's a big club called the 15% Club, which is for the disabled community, and it's great. And I love when other people come and listen to the conversation. There are limitations as well. Every tool has accessibility limitations. Sometimes you can do the work to make your content more accessible, but sometimes you're completely limited by the platform and you can't do anything. For example, Instagram Live, I have posted it to my channel and toggled on automatic captioning. And for some reason, the automatic captions didn't work. And this has happened to me multiple times. And I can't download the video to add the captions myself. So I'm blocked by Instagram in this case in terms of making it accessible. Clubhouse doesn't have captions, and we're actively lobbying them to do better with accessibility. They've done some things that help people who use screen readers, and there are different, but it's just not all the way there yet. So every platform has these limits, and many people are limited in terms of participating in these digital spaces. So I hope to see that changing and improving in the future.
Thank you. So do we have any questions from the audience? Raise your hand because this format requires you to raise your hand so I can activate you.
I have a question, but you can't see me, Rodrigo.
No, I see you.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Go ahead, please.
Hi, Catarina. Catarina is my friend, everybody. I just want to put that out there also. Catarina, could you talk a little bit about when we are designing things, to how do we make sure that we're authentically making them accessible for people? Like, how do we include people in the room that can really have a say, whether it's in like digital design or in construction design or architecture?
Thank you for this question. So just a few quick points about design. The ADA says that all public spaces must be accessible, and this actually applies to digital spaces that are available to the public. This applies to websites. However, the enforcement mechanism is that individuals have to like complain, basically, if something is not accessible, and also they can initiate a lawsuit. So there's no enforcement mechanism that's checking on a regular basis. So I think this is unfortunate, but if you, like you said, you want to be accessible and you're going to do that, amazing. For digital design, it's very important for user experience designers to learn about accessibility and all the tools that they have at their disposal, not just to talk with disabled individuals, because there are best practices that already exist. So I'm hosting a workshop on accessibility and user experience design later this month. If you want the information, just DM me at Blindish Latina on Instagram. So that provides a foundation. I also have an ebook on my Instagram, then the link in the bio, on 12 ways that you can use accessibility to expand your reach, and it has a lot of the strategies for that. And then for architecture, I'm learning about that. It's not my field. I think the most important thing is to always try to go further than what the law requires, try to go further than the bare minimum, and really work over time to get an understanding of the lived experience of disabled people and users and involve them in the process. So you can improve, because becoming more accessible is a journey. You're not going to know it all right away.
Hi, thanks so much, Catarina, for taking time to talk to us. So kind of piggyback to that question, in both the visual environment and the built environment, what would you say are the most frustrating thing you experience from either visual designers and then in buildings? Like, what to you is the one thing, if you have one thing that you'd like us to fix, what would you say to us?
Okay, light switches, baby. Light switches. They blend into the wall. They're sometimes located in illogical places. And I think there could be a really simple fix. Could you have glow-in-the-dark tape that you just put around the light switch so that I can find it when I have to go to the bathroom and I'm not using my phone flashlight and slapping the wall and trying to figure out, because especially I just have a lot of experience in New York, very small bathrooms, all different configurations, all different sizes. In the workplace, I also recently learned that new construction requires automatic light switches. So the problem with that is that sometimes users that they turn it off, so and they override the automatic, so they just don't know. And that's education there, making sure that there's a way to let people know, don't turn these off, because then you're overriding the actual accessibility of it. For digital design, it is color contrast over and over and over again. That is really difficult. People creating graphics with pale pink background and white text, I can't read it. And there are many people who actually can't read that. It's not just the blind. So those are my two things.
Thank you so much. Definitely. Second one I get on the designers about a lot. Thank you.
Paula?
Thank you. This has been just very informative for all of us. And I think that putting ourselves in different type of shoes, that, it's important as we continue to design. And speaking about, understanding better, what are some of the recommendations that you give friends, family members, and others to really be able to support that process from someone that just learned that is disabled, and that transition, right? It's wonderful when that person now has accepted and it's feel comfortable, but what happens in that transition, especially for parents with kids or siblings or loved ones? I think that's an unknown territory for many of us, and I have experienced that myself. And you feel in a way that, oh my gosh, I feel like, you're myself bumping into topics or things that you quite don't know how to be proper or maybe educated. I think it would be, I don't know, what are your thoughts or recommendations on that?
Well, I really appreciate that question. I think it's very practical because so many of us in our lives will have that moment with not knowing how to support someone or what to do. I'll try to give some short recommendations. I think, especially for someone who's newly diagnosed, I think you, as a person is trying to support them, should educate yourself as much as possible, because they're at the beginning of their journey. They're not going to be able to educate you, and they're probably dealing with a lot of emotions at that time. Depends if they're an adult or a child. So educate yourself as much as possible rather than putting a burden on them to educate you. And it depends, it varies really widely on the condition, but I'll just give a quick example. When I was receiving services from the state, I had my mobility trainer come to my house and give a workshop to my friends on how to guide me. Like, what is the proper way to guide me? Because everybody does different things and it's not all correct, in terms of how to guide a blind person. If you're a parent of a child with disability, I highly, highly encourage you to focus on making the disability a positive thing in their life and connect them to their disability identity. And really try to stay away from the special needs label and kind of making their disability all about you. Like, focus on the child and connecting to adults with that same disability. Because I think a lot of times that can be really helpful. And for example, with me, I have been wearing hearing aids all my life, but I never learned sign language. I was never exposed to the deaf community as a child or growing up. And I think that I could have gained a lot from the positivity of deaf culture and the communications and just the rich history that's there. So I think that just some simple tips: educate yourself, connect to disability identity, and talk about the disability. Ask the person questions about how they're doing. Like, my extended family, I think they just kind of ignore it. They don't ask at gatherings. And I think I would appreciate if they tried, even if it wasn't the right wording, but just creating an opening so that I can know that, oh, hey, they want to talk about it, or they want to know what kind of support I want, rather than just it being a thing that's not named. So yes, and if someone is telling you about a new diagnosis, try to stay away from pity and sorry reactions. Just try, I have on my Instagram a graphic or what to say when somebody discloses their disability to you. I also have that on LinkedIn. That's a whole nother workshop, but just work on learning some responses that are guided by what the disability community says.
Thank you.
Catarina, I see more interest, but for the sake of time and to respect your time, we're going to cut right now. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it personally, the team too, but personally I learned a lot researching for the interview and researching about you, and even more now in the interview. So we really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And anybody else who had a question that we were not able to get to, you can connect with me on LinkedIn at Catarina Rivera or at Blindish Latina on Instagram. I'd be happy to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catalina.
It was great to meet you.
Thank you, Catarina.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.